Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're returning to War in the Pacific, Admirals Edition, our Let's Play series against XTRG. It is March 20th of 1942 in our Let's Play series, and we are witnessing Japanese advances across the South Pacific. We've started deploying some of our submarines toward Rabal or other Japanese bases in the South Pacific to locations where they might be able to intercept enemy shipping or enemy warship traffic. Meanwhile, we can see the Japanese have deployed a submarine here off the coast of Perth to the west of Perth. Fortunately, its two torpedoes that it fired at the tanker Athula Duke both failed to hit the tanker, and so the tanker continues on its merry way. Meanwhile, more Japanese submarines operating off the U.S. west coast, just west of Seattle, putting a couple of torpedoes in here to a cargo ship, the Manoya. Two torpedoes into it. It's a smallish cargo ship, so it goes down here with the loss of its captain, unfortunately. So multiple submarine attacks here early in this turn. Meanwhile, Japanese fast transports are continuing to land across the Solomon Sea, and we are landing our troops at Baker Island. So we did get our troops ashore. Apparently, there's no Japanese resistance on the island, so we've got 16 casualties reported. We lost 2 infantry squads disabled, 11 non-combatant losses in the landings on Baker Island, but there's no Japanese troops there, at least no one's shooting at them there, so that's a good sign for our troops coming ashore. Okay. Meanwhile, the Japanese continue to land on all of the islands on the western elements of the Solomon Sea off the east coast of Australia, so that may be a pain in the ass if they start building airfields at all these dot bases, but for the moment anyway, they're largely just sort of consolidating their hold on the Solomon Islands, which I'm not really in the mood to oppose at this time. Okay, we've got recon detected across a bunch of... we're moving into the recon phase, so further landings or fast transports are occurring across this portion. I guess we'll go ahead and fast forward here. U.S. submarine Pollock firing torpedoes at the Takao, and a hit but no explosions. So we put a torpedo into the side of a Japanese cruiser, a heavy cruiser in the Solomon Sea, and our skipper did his job. He put his fish on target, and the fish failed to detonate, and now Pollock has to pay the price for putting a torpedo into a cruiser, but the torpedo didn't explode. God damn you, Mark 14. I hate you. I wish you would just get better already. Meanwhile, the Japanese are dropping depth charges on this sub here. Didn't seem like there were any real hits there. We'll go ahead and fast forward, and you can see no hits on the sub. So 4 torpedoes fired, 1 of them hit. None of them exploded. Lovely. Just lovely. Meanwhile, Japanese recon over Rangoon, detecting a bunch of our cargo ships there. Japanese recon over Sabang, where we're moving some patrol boats. And 10 ships near Johnston Island moving southwest. Speed 20 knots. We'll have to take a look at that. Meanwhile, Japanese Betty bombers are coming in here, going after our PT boats at Sabang. Semarang. I don't know why I was saying Sabang. 2 torpedo boats there. The Japanese fired 6 torpedoes at these torpedo boats and missed them all. So that's a nice, convenient waste of Japanese torpedoes and supply. Okay, some Sonya dive bombers are going after Bataan. That's kind of become the new norm, just some light dive bombing that doesn't really do much of anything. In theory, it would slow our building of fortifications if we were building fortifications there, but we're not. Chinese bombers here going after Japanese troops pursuing west along the highway toward Guilin. 10 more Chinese SB-3s came in. I forgot to cancel their bombing raids, but apparently the Japanese didn't see the last raids as meaningful enough to send fighters up against them, so 19 bombers end up hitting them in 2 different raids. Not a whole lot of damage and a couple of troops disabled, but again, not a big deal there. Koroboro, what are you trying to spam? You're trying to spam the Mark 14 emoji? Are you, maybe you're not a sub, so you don't get to use that emoji or emote or whatever. All right. I wouldn't say a quiet turn, but not a ton of air activity this turn. Ah, yes, ironic that you need to be a sub to get the access to the emote about a defective torpedo, huh? Torpedo for a sub. It's fitting, right? Okay, so that's going to be it for the air operation phase. More unloading of troops at Baker Island. It is definitely clear he has nothing there. All right, so Japanese deliberate attack at Singapore here. You can see they did wait up. I'm surprised they didn't launch any bombing raids on Singapore. It makes me curious of where their medium bombers all went off to. They had been hitting Singapore pretty hard, but we didn't see him hitting at Rangoon either, which makes me a little bit confused about where he may have put his medium bombers. We know there's some still in the Dutch East Indies because they went after those torpedo bombers, or those patrol boats. But I don't know if I'm concerned, but I'm a little bit baffled by what he's doing with all of those aircraft. Meanwhile, Japanese attack here at Singapore. You can see they've got overwhelming force, as they have the last few times. We are doing a little bit of damage to the Imperial Guards Division, a few of the engineer regiments and infantry regiments, at least in terms of disabling some squads. We'll see how many we actually kill. Engineers reduced fortifications down to 1. But apparently that was all that was needed for Singapore to fall. So mark it down in your calendars, folks. March 20th, 1942, Singapore falls to the Japanese army. And you can see all of those units here surrendering after a long and valiant defense. They may have reclaimed the honor of the British and Commonwealth forces in their defense, lasting a month and, 15 days longer? Or no, a month and 5 days longer than historical. You can see the Japanese had 4,200 assault odds, or assault value. Somehow their assault odds were way higher than what their actual assault value was, which is interesting. Probably due to their engineer total. Defensive value was only 580. When adjusted for fortifications, it's up to 1193, but that still gave them 3-to-1 odds. They reduced the forts to level 1, and with 3-to-1 odds, I'm guessing if it was 2-to-1, the forts would have just been reduced to 0, but with 3-to-1 with level 1 forts after the engineers dropped them from 2-to-1, that was why they surrendered. They had no more slack to give. And so you can see here the Japanese lose 2,300 men in the final attack, 4 squads destroyed on combatants, 15 non-combatants destroyed, 61 engineer squads destroyed. His engineers continued to lose pretty heavy losses throughout the campaign. 101 squads disabled, 44 non-combatants, and 94 engineers. So that's a pretty heavy price to pay on his engineer side. 150 squads destroyed or disabled, 105 infantry squads destroyed or disabled, 19 guns lost, 5 of those destroyed, 17 vehicles lost, 9 of those destroyed. Meanwhile, the Allies an absolutely catastrophic loss, as it was historically. 1,231 infantry squads, 4,211 non-combatants, 294 engineers, 662 guns, 456 vehicles, 32 units destroyed, 42,236 casualties, and you can see all of these. These are the assaulting units here. The defending units down here, all of these will go down in history as the units that surrendered at Singapore. They surrendered the bastion in the Pacific, the Gibraltar of the Pacific, to the Imperial Japanese Army. And it is a bleak day for Mr. Churchill and for the British Empire. It is a bleak day for all of the Allied forces. All right, Japanese deliberate attack at Rabal. They're trying to drive the Lark Battalion back, which I guess haven't pulled back yet. And they get 6-to-1 odds, but they don't destroy it. They do lose 13 casualties. They do use some of their own supply up, which is kind of the reason they're there. We lose some squads, but the Lark Battalion's doomed. It's mainly there to try and consume Japanese supply. Meanwhile, Green Island is going to fall to the Japanese. There's no defenders there, so they launch an attack there and take that island. Long Island here off the eastern coast of New Guinea, also unoccupied, will fall to the Japanese. And that's going to do it for the turn. So it was a monumental turn in the sense that that Singapore fell, I guess. Meanwhile, we're going to have to take a look and see what this report of his shipping was near Palmyra and see what might have been heading off that way. So we'll wait for this phase to go through. Fortifications in Christmas Island increased to 3, so that's nice. The landing on Baker is really an attempt to secure the Line Islands from direct attack by the Japanese by refocusing his efforts there, so toward Baker, further west. So we'll see about that, but I'm really curious about those Japanese ships that are PBYs detected that were moving near Palmyra, so we'll have to take a look and see what's over there. We haven't seen his carriers in a while, so I suppose it could be that. Could also just be like a cruiser raid, or maybe it's just a submarine and a freaked out patrol pilot. All right, so let's go back to the save. So first off, Palmyra, where were these detected ships? I don't see anything. Was this just a myth? Do they not exist? Nothing red. What was the operations report? It was speed 20 knots, right? The Big Bang, thank you very much for the Prime sub. Appreciate it, dude. I thought it said Palmyra. Or it was Johnston Island. 10 ships spotted at 163, 113 near Johnston Island. Speed 20, moving southwest. Johnston Island, huh? 163. And then it was 163 what? 163, 113. Okay, well, I'm pretty sure that he didn't have 10 ships 1 hex away from Johnston Island. So whoever put that report in is drunk. So nothing there. At least I don't think anyone there. Okay. Meanwhile, Christmas Island increased its fortifications to level 3, so that's good to see. They're also working on increasing the airfield to level 2 and the port capacity. Palmyra has its fortifications at level 3 already, working toward level 4. It's already got level 2 port capacity. The troops landing at Baker Island haven't taken the base yet. It's an atoll. But they will go ahead and deliberate attack to take the base this turn. I'm a little bit confused what happened to this unit. I thought this was a fully built-out unit, which would have been 20 infantry squads, but it only says there's 8. The combat report only showed a loss of like 2 squads disabled, though, and there's no troops left on the transport. So I'm just slightly confused what happened there. That seems bizarre to me. I'm not quite sure why it would do that. I'm kind of thinking that we should pull these transports out, though, right away. So we've got 1 transport, but it is worth like 19 victory value. So I am kind of tempted to just immediately withdraw it. Even though it still has 2,000 supply on board, the troops who have already landed already have 357 supply with them. So that should be more than enough for them to kind of take the base and then be okay for a little while. The score with the loss of Singapore is going to be bad. So you can see before, I think it was like 12,000 Allied to 10,000 Japanese. Well, the fall of Singapore dramatically altered the score. The Allied score dropped to 9,016. The Japanese score ballooned to 12,472. As a reminder, though, Japan needs 3 times the Allied score to win in 1942. They still need 2 times the Allied score by 1943, but the 1942 amount of 3 times is going to be pretty difficult without substantial gains beyond what they're going to get. The fall of Bataan is really going to hurt us in terms of supply, or in terms of victory points. He's going to rack up a ton of victory points for taking Bataan, but we won't lose a ton. So he'll get, maybe 2,000-3,000 more victory points. Maybe even 4,000. But even if that puts him at 16,000, he needs 27,000 as long as we hang on to 9,000 victory points. And Bataan is only worth 12 to the Allies. He only gets 12, so it's only a 24-point swing in terms of the base. And yes, he'll get a bunch for the loss of the squads, but he won't, it's not it's not going to drop our own victory point section. So, but yeah, I'm guessing that that Baker can be supplied with PBYs out of Palmyra or something to that effect. So we probably don't need the transport here anymore. So I think what we'll do is we'll just return it back to Pearl at flank speed to try and get out of range, at least for a turn, of any air cover he might have coming in this direction. Meanwhile, I did move a bombardment task force south. Actually, it was on its way toward Australia, Tahiti first. But we have a bunch of battleships down here that haven't been detected and got way closer to Canton than I originally intended for them to. But their destination is Tahiti. Hopefully, to get out of the way here, they can get down to Tahiti and get safe. The intention is to get them over toward New Zealand, where we can operate them in the South Pacific against the Japanese down in this direction. But that's where they're at right now. I don't plan to bombard Canton. I mean, at best, he's probably got a few float planes here. There's no indication of anything more. The fact that we got in here completely undetected before we landed tells me that he probably doesn't have more than a few float planes. He could put some bombs, or if he's got a headquarter unit here, maybe even he doesn't have a headquarter unit here. But if he did, maybe he could put a torpedo into one of our ships. But I don't think he's got more than a handful of aircraft based out of Canton. Canton. So I think we're relatively safe for that. I do have some shipping on the way down to Baker Island, and it's gonna move into Baker Island once the base falls to us, and that is AVD. So it's an aircraft tender for PBY aircraft. It can support up to 6 seaplanes. So the intention is to base seaplanes out of Baker and then extend our own reach and influence out toward Tarawa, toward the northern edge of the Ellice Islands, to sort of be a thorn in his side for moving troops potentially south toward Fiji, at least from his eastern flank. So that's something that I'm intending on doing. I need an AE if I want to operate out of New Zealand. Yeah, I do need some I do need some ammunition tenders or whatnot for large caliber shells to be replenished. I don't know if I'll base it exactly out of New Zealand, but yes, you're 100% right. To reload battleship shells, you do need some support craft there because the ports won't be large enough. I'm aware of that. Meanwhile, Raoul Island is done unloading the engineers here, so the New Zealand 2nd RNZAF base force is done unloading at Raoul, and its building of the airfield is making progress. It's up to 39% completion, so slowly but surely we're getting toward turning that dot base into a real base. Meanwhile, we've got some these are returning back to the U.S., but we've got some anti-aircraft batteries on their way toward the Fiji line. We've got the 197th Coastal Anti-Aircraft Regiment, which is including 19 50 caliber anti-aircraft machine guns, 11 37mm anti-aircraft guns, 6 75mm anti-aircraft guns, all on their way to Pago. So they're on their way there. We also are unloading elements of the 205th Coastal Anti-Aircraft Battery here at Penryn Island to provide a little bit of anti-aircraft support there to these troops here. I don't know why I have a port service unit here at Penryn. That seems a little bit silly. I should probably move them. It's not going to be a major port basically ever, so the need for naval support is much reduced there. They'd be much better off at Pago or Suva or somewhere like that. Okay. Whoops, hit the wrong button. Meanwhile, we've got some additional troops on the way to Melbourne, coastal anti-aircraft batteries on their way to Australia. We've also got coastal anti-aircraft regiments on their way to Suva. So large numbers of reinforcements are on their way. We've even got the Admiral Division on their way to, I think, to Australia. Toward Australia there. So we're in the process of reinforcing our position in the Pacific considerably. We've also got 3 different fighter groups on transports currently on their way to Australia, along with a bunch of supply. And we also have some AKEs and some AEs on their way to, lo and behold, Australia. So look at that. The route to Nomaya might be risky. Let's see, where was that guy going? The Admiral Division? this should be far enough south from Nomai. It's, well, maybe not actually. 14 hexes? I'll have to divert them further south. Fear not, I shall do that before they get there. Okay, so meanwhile, the American carriers are still hanging out at Hobart in Tasmania. I just took this turn to refuel them completely, so they're all back to 100% fuel after great exertions. We brought in some tankers into Hobart, some fleet oilers, and they replenished the entirety of the oil on the carrier task forces. They need to replenish the oil on the cruisers that are in port here, but everybody in port is back to a full load of fuel. The heavy cruisers in these two surface combatant groups still need more fuel. I tried to refuel some of them, but I think they just refueled from each other because the tankers were already at 100 or 1,000 op use. So we'll have to replenish some of these guys. I think one of the task forces pulled from the other, so one of these two task forces is actually at full. But then the this one here is below full. So we'll need to replenish some of these heavy cruisers at Hobart. We also do have a tanker loading up that is going to head this way, apparently right past a Japanese submarine. So maybe we should, well, we've already got a destroyer out here patrolling that area. Can we add a destroyer to the task force? Yes, we can. And an AM. So we'll add a couple of screening vessels for this tanker, so hopefully it makes it down to Hobart. Again, only 5,000 fuel going down here, but it should help with some of the shipping. Meanwhile, the Hermes is on its way to the Fiji Island, or at least to Raul, where hopefully by the time it arrives, Raul will be converted to an airfield, and we can bring down 20 Marine F-4s from Suva, which is operating up here. Suva itself has 126 aircraft. All of them are ready. Most of them are currently training. There are some that are doing search missions and whatnot. But there's one thing that caught my eye here. This caught my eye. If you look at the base of Tana, we reconned, and there's a Japanese surface task force. There's no port here, or nothing to really to speak of. And according to recon, there are two float plane tenders and a battleship spotted right here at Tana. Now, float plane carriers are often misidentified as float plane tenders. So these could be carriers. I mean, they could be something completely unrelated as well. But the fact that we spotted these guys so close to Fiji makes me a little bit uneasy. It makes me wonder if he's making a lunge east toward Fiji with the Kido Butai, and maybe or Kido Butai, and maybe he'll try and crush Fiji now while he can. I don't have a lot of bombers that I can send against him. I do have some dive bombers. So we've got some Dauntlesses, some old Dauntlesses, and we've got some SB-3s, which are newer Dauntlesses. Neither of the crews are these guys are actually pretty decent. Their experience levels anyway. Their naval bombing's at 45 overall, so their naval bombing traits aren't great. The SBD-1s, meanwhile, their crews are actually on average better, but their top end are worse. So we've got 2 flights of Dauntless dive bombers, but the enemy would have to come within 5 hexes for us to be able to lash out against them. 8 if we're going with the newer Dauntlesses. These guys are currently still 13 hexes away. We also have some Vincents, basically they're wildebeest biplanes. We have 6 of them from a New Zealand group. Their pilots are not great at naval bombing, average experience of 30. They're mainly here to train and not die. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, the Vincents don't carry torpedoes. All they carry is like big, heavy bombs, 1,000-pound bombs, which if they can put one on a ship would be nice. But, I'm skeptical of how useful they would be in an engagement. I would much prefer they have torpedoes. Meanwhile, we have some float planes and we have some long-range recons in like the Hudsons or whatnot, which should be able to get a better eye at 14 hexes. They should be in range of being able to get a better eye. If the enemy does come at our base, though, our ability to repel the Kido Butai will be limited with only 55 fighters. Granted, they're all modern. They're all F4s or P40s, so we might do a little bit of damage to them, but probably not a ton. The pilots in these groups are actually, on average, there's a couple of really good pilots here, 70, 66, 63, 63, 62, 61, 60, blah, blah, blah. But there's also a fair bit of greener pilots that are here mostly just to train, in this group anyway. This P40 group is better on the whole, 66 on the high end, average of 55, and a slightly better experienced crews. And then the other VMF group, the other Marine group here is, decent on the high end and a fair amount of training going on there. So yeah, that's our situation there. Meanwhile, because we did establish the airfield at Vavu, we can transfer another 45 modern P-40s west to Tsuva if we need to. So we've got 25 P-40Es at Pago, which can reach with drop tanks right away. And then we've got 20 P-40Bs, which would have to take 2 turns to get there. The P-40E crews are not as good. This is primarily a training outfit. And then the P-40Bs are, I think, probably about the same. No, actually, they're better. They've got quite a few in the 60s in terms of their experience. The B-17s were moved back to Australia, Sean Mack, so I don't have them anywhere nearby, and I would rather train them at the moment. They're going to be largely useless in skip bombing attacks until we get their crews trained up a bit. So we did move them back to Australia. There's 46 of them, but only 29 are ready because I actually upgraded 2 of the groups from B-17Ds to B-17Es to be more modern. But that does mean 8 of this entire group here and this entire group here are no longer effective. They have 0 active aircraft right now as they're working on bringing these new planes up to scratch. So we're largely just training these guys on low-level naval strikes, which currently they're not very good at all. But that's where the B-17s are at. The B-17Ds, meanwhile, we'll fill out some of these groups with the Ds that we freed up by upgrading the Es, and get some of those remaining. Actually, both the remaining D groups will be at a full 8-plane complement as well. So when all's told, we'll have 48 B-17s ready to operate out of Australia. That's a decent amount of 4-engine heavies, but they might be more useful right now in patrol duties, but certainly not striking an enemy carrier group. Oh, they're not in port anyway, Sean Mack. I mean, even if the ships are here, they're not stationary. They're not in port. They're clearly in a task force. So we're not going to hit the B. If they are carriers, we're not going to hit them in port. I'm debating whether I want to move my P-40Es from Pago west to have an engagement here. If he does come for us, it would increase our air complement this turn from 55 to 80 aircraft, and then next turn up to 100 if he doesn't hit us this first turn. Although it is a little bit unnerving, given that would put our entirety of our fighter force in the Fiji line at risk of being crushed in one battle. 80 fighters is nice. I mean, I feel like they could do a reasonable amount of work. We also have 33 P-40Es in the pools that could instantly be, or not instantly, but pretty quickly be brought in as replacements. But again, it depends if these are actually the carriers and if they're actually going to swing south. There's no indication of their heading. He's been sort of teasing me a lot about the Coral Sea, saying that it's his, where are my carriers, all of these kind of things. So maybe he's even hanging out here trying to lure me to making a mistake or something like that. My carriers are in no position to attack for a couple more days, even if I wanted to try and force a carrier engagement. The Yorktown, Enterprise, Lexington, Saratoga, their system damage levels are pretty low, but I was going to leave them in port for 3 or 4 more days to get them just a little bit lower. If we leave them in port for 3 more days, 2 of the carriers, the Yorktown and the Saratoga, will be back to perfect strength. The Enterprise and Lexington will probably be to like 1 system damage. The current levels really are no impediment at all, but I do have a British carrier that's currently pierside, and I can't bring it back to active duty for 3 more days. So if I rush the Americans out, it'll be without the Indomitable. At least for 3 days, which I'd rather not go in a carrier short. I also don't really want to rush into an area of risk. I mean, maybe when I was wondering where he moved his medium bombers, maybe he moved them all into the South Pacific to try and prepare for a battle there. By the way, one thing I will call out: we massively improved the quality of the Indomitable. So the Indomitable's Sea Hurricane Squadron here had 9 aircraft. We resized it to an 18 aircraft squadron. So once it starts pulling replacements from the pools here, because there's 11 aircraft in pool, we need to get to a better port. But once we start pulling those aircraft from those pools, we'll double our Sea Hurricane strength on this carrier and give us a pretty good fighter squadron there. You still think a lot of his fleet is at truck, Galactic? I mean, I'm not really able to do much of anything about his main fleet at this point in time. At least not without irresponsible risk taking on our part. Korabara, thank you very much for the Prime sub. Appreciate it, dude. So yeah, that's the situation there. Meanwhile, I am loading up some troops, or not. Where are they? There are some troops going somewhere. I'm loading up some light amounts of troops, I think in Melbourne, which are going to be going to Melbourne? No. Oh, these guys are unloading coastal guns, so they came from the U.S. Okay, or from Bora Bora. I thought I was loading up some troops somewhere. I believe my intention was to land some troops on Lord Howe Island, but I can't remember where I put them. All right, let's work our way toward the areas where more is going on. Obviously, big question mark in and around the Fiji line. We'll have to figure that out. Meanwhile, we are loading supplies at Perth that are going to be headed up to Darwin. So we're loading a convoy of small cargo ships. These are all coastal freighters with 15,000 supply. They're loading at Perth. Perth has not apparently enough supply for them, but there's over 700,000 supply in Australia. So I imagine they'll pull it in via rail to Perth. And then we'll bring them up to Darwin to try and, increase the supply of that base. Meanwhile, we've got 20,000 fuel that'll be arriving at Perth tomorrow. We have this tanker here, the Athelduke, which was fired on by Japanese submarines, which is on its way back to Cape Town. We're going to bump it up to full speed for a turn, I think. Actually, we can't do that. It can't reach. It needs every last dime of its fuel in order to get back at current speed. So we'll just have to hope he doesn't send his sub west to try and intercept her. Meanwhile, we've got 9,000 fuel coming in here on cargo ships with an escort, so he may go after them. We also have some support ships on their way into Perth with a minimal escort. We have mine-laying ships that are headed out to Semarang. We'll see if they ever get there, if the Japanese attack before. We also have 38,000 fuel on tankers on the way into Perth with 2 corvettes escort as well. So we'll have to see what he does in and around Perth. That might be a problem. Okay, so Singapore has fallen. That base is gone. In terms of what we were able to get out, it looks like at Medan we got out another 20. Well, we have a total of 26 Malayan infantry squads from the SSV brigade that we got out. They're done switching over to strategic mode, so they're going to rail up to Sabang. That'll probably take 2 days. So we should have 26 infantry squads there for the SSV. Meanwhile, there's already 5 infantry squads here from the SSV, so we'll have about 31 Malayan infantry squads at Sabang. Additionally, the Loyang Loyal Battalion here currently has 2 British infantry squads there. There are going to be 6 more arriving tomorrow, as well as some support groups or other sections. They're coming via rail. We have the 514th Punjab Battalion hasn't fully loaded on transports. There's still 22 infantry sections or squads here that are disabled that have not loaded on the ships. I'm worried if he moves all of his aircraft from Malaya into ship search duties that they may hit these guys on transports, and I would hate to lose a unit like that on transports. But so far, there's no indication that he's doing any kind of recon over Sabang. None of our shipping anywhere near Sabang has been detected at all. Granted, we have positive weather. There's storms and rain preventing him from getting good sightings on them. But we are going to be loading the Indian battalion up here, and then we're going to swing it north and around Port Blair to Rangoon, where it can replenish its cohesion there. I'll probably pull the Loyal Battalion out to Rangoon via air transport, and then elements of the 24th New Zealand Pioneers Group. 3 support are at Sabang. We also did get some of those units into Rangoon. So the 24th New Zealand Pioneer Company, we got none of its engineer vehicles, but we can't transfer those via air. We got 11 engineers and 5 support troops into Rangoon, so that's good for us. And yeah, that's the situation there. So not a ton of troops left at Sabang, really. Just 36 load cost of the Pioneers, 180 load cost of the SSV, and 40 of the Loyal Battalion. That'll change a little bit in the coming days with another 220 arriving of the Loyal Battalion, and then the 780 of the SSV. But we got a fair number of troops out. We already got the headquarters units largely out. The 223 group is out entirely. The troops arrived today via transport, so you can see the 223 RAF group is currently in Rangoon on transports. We'll go ahead and undock this group here so we can dock the amphibious troops and get them unloaded ASAP. So the 223 group's remaining elements, mostly just, I think, support. Yeah, just 46 support are coming ashore here at Rangoon. And then we've got another 40,000 supply in the port of Rangoon. Additional to that, we also have 15,000 east here at Pegu. A large number of our troops here, 2 divisions and an Indian brigade, have moved south of Pegu and have started digging in here. So we can see that the 46th Indian Brigade is now at level 1 forts. The 1st Burma and 18th British Divisions are both working on those fortifications to try and strengthen their own positions here south of Pegu, where he'll obviously have to come at us. I'm a little bit uneasy that he could send a large bombardment force in at these guys and wreck these guys. There's no way that in the field they're going to have a ton of fortifications. Pegu itself, though, only has level 3, which isn't going to prevent getting nuked by like 6 battleships. So we'll have to see what he can do there. Meanwhile, the 17th Indian Division is resting back at Pegu. It has 48 infantry squads that are disabled. I want to try and get those up closer to around, probably drop those by 39 or so we can get them up to about, 200 Indian assault squads or infantry squads. So then we can move them south to join the other troops. The BFF Brigade also pulled back here. They've got 53 Burmese squads that are currently disabled. I want to try and get that number down so we can bring its combat value up by about 50 and whatnot. Excuse me. All right, meanwhile, our P-38s at Mandalay are working on getting up to speed. You can see we got about a third of the squadron active. Meanwhile, we've got a fair amount of Hurricanes here that are disabled or whatnot. They're flying long-range cap over Suyong to hopefully prevent him from dropping any paratroopers in our rear. We are in the process of getting the 54th Corps there. They will arrive tomorrow. They're only 3 miles away. And once we have those troops here, then all of our bases in the eastern portion of Burma and western portion of China will be safe from enemy paratroopers, at least any sort of surprise paratrooper raid. We have the 254th Armored Brigade is moving toward Magua, also trying to prevent him from launching any paratrooper raids in our rear. We'll probably move them down to Pegu eventually. Really, that's one of the key things that's one of the big strategical plays of pulling out the troops that we pulled out from Singapore, was not that those specific troops were going to be tremendously valuable, but if I can put kind of a mid-sized battalion that's not super important at all of these like different bases along here, then I can free up really meaningful, armored brigades or infantry divisions or other things like that. I can free those units up to get them to the front lines where they should be without risk of their rear being, falling to an enemy paratrooper unit. So that's sort of my thought process there. It does seem like he's increasing his strength at Molman a little bit. He's gone from 2 units up to 7. Even if he split those, that indicates some increase of size of troops. Can't be the men from Singapore yet. Meanwhile, Bangkok has apparently 38 fighters, 19 bombers, and 65 auxiliaries. If those bomber numbers are true, then he's sent his bombers elsewhere, because there were like 60 bombers there a few days ago. Meanwhile, as we move east to looking at China, we can see he has advanced, apparently in just 2 turns, to within 1 hex of Guilin. He hasn't moved everything there. He's got 4 more units coming up, so he's got 55,000 troops and 43 AVs. That feels like this is not a... 350 guns is a lot, but only 43 AFVs is not the strongest play I would expect. But it doesn't look like the troops to the east of Quilin are yet advancing on Quilin, so that means we probably still have at least 2 to 3 days. I'm sure he's waiting for these troops to catch up before he starts moving on Quilin. That's good news, though, for us, because we've got 3 additional corps that are going to be moving south into Quilin, and as we can see here, they've moved 25 miles, they've moved 22 miles and 22 miles respectively, so they're almost halfway there. In 3 days minimum, I would expect them to be down to Quilin, and I don't think he gets to Quilin in less than 3 days, given he isn't even moving yet. Meanwhile, the troops in Quilin, we've got our defense value up to 844. That's because the 66th Chinese Corps is there, the 3rd Chinese Cavalry Corps is there. We're going to have the 6th and 14th Corps pull back to rest and recuperate. I plan to have them rest and recuperate over here at Luchao, where they can get their disabled squads back into action. You can see the 14th Corps has 218 infantry squads, but only one of them, 219 infantry squads, but only one of them is actually in fighting shape. And the 6th Corps is only a little bit better with 51 ready squads and 137 are disabled. And so those guys need to get out of the fight so they can rest and recuperate and get ready to go back into the fight. The 6th Chinese Corps not that one. The 2nd Provisional Chinese Corps looks small, but that's just because it doesn't have much in the way of active squads. We are ordering it to replace, but it looks like those replacements are coming in a little bit delayed. We are trying to pull some of those troops forward from the replacement pools. And then we've got the 3rd and 66 that we already showed. So the 800 assault value that we have, we are going to lose about 100 of that to pull back and rest and recuperate, but we are going to get 1,000 back, almost 1,100 back. So we'll get about 1,000 more. So the defenders here should have roughly 1,800 assault value. It is also a wooded terrain, which is ×2 defensive value, and it is a level 3 fortification. So level 3 forts with ×2 terrain with 1,800 assault value hopefully will allow us to hold out against whatever he's sending us, although who knows what he's really sending us. We really don't know. It could be overpowering. We're not really sure. Meanwhile, we're continuing to move troops north to Xinyu, right, or Tianxiui. I don't know how to pronounce that. Up here to try and garrison here, and then we're also sending a force to Kuncheng to garrison there as well to prevent any sort of surprise paratrooper landing in our rear. The base that's further north, it's still definitely in range potentially of Japanese forward bases. I'm not sure if he's flown any recon over it, but we are bringing troops north and south to garrison there. We also have troops on the way to Ankang, which seems like the more likely landing spot because we've got like 1,200 assault value here south of it, but we also have troops on the way there as well. And we also are currently flying cap over all 3 of these bases with fighters based out of Xi'an, and then also fighters based out of Qingkou. So that's the situation in China right now. I anticipate a large battle near Quilin. I also anticipate a battle near Sian, although I'm not sure when or where he'll strike at Sian. Meanwhile, Batan's supply situation, still almost 14,000 supply here. Our troops are still at almost 2,000 assault value, and he's made really no effort to reduce us here. So other than bombing us, there's not a lot going on at Batan. Down at Mindanao, on the island of Mindanao here, these troops are in very bad shape as their supply situation is getting critical. But they've continued to hold on the southern tip or on the northern tip of the island of Mindanao for the time being. At Ambon, we have been trying to fly a little bit in the way of supplies in to reinforce the Sparrow Battalion, but it feels like it's a slightly bit of a losing battle. We've got enough supply there for the garrison of 34 AV, but the Ambon base force and the Sparrow Battalion are both very short on supply. We are flying some supply in with PBYs out of Northern Australia, but it's not bringing enough, I don't think. But there's not a lot I can do about that. We are trying to strengthen Batavia for the eventual Japanese strike against Java here. We're trying to pull elements of the Southeast Borneo KNL Battalion out of Borneo via float planes and bring them back to Java. You can see here there's only 13 infantry squads left in that base, in that unit. We have already pulled 12 of them out, so almost half the infantry strength has been pulled out, as well as 1 Vickers rifle squad, for a total of 13 assault value, increasing the garrison strength there to almost 1,000 assault value. We're trying to get the fort levels up to 4, but currently they're sitting at around 3. I did put my torpedo boats in to repair at this base here where he was at Semarang, where his torpedo bombers were trying to strike at him. They got there, but they ran out of fuel, so they took a massive amount of system damage. They're not going to be in any shape for 3 or 4 days to resist Japanese landings. So hopefully they don't land yet. Meanwhile, we are sending a couple of PT boats that are in better shape south from Batavia to that base, because our intelligence indicated the Japanese were going to be landing there. And then we also are repairing another 4 PT boats up at Batavia. 3 of them should be ready tomorrow. So if he doesn't land today, we should have 6 PT boats at Semarang by tomorrow, I guess 2 days from now. Additionally, again, this is all the important reason that we hope he doesn't land at Semarang quite yet. We have 24 modern P-40s and Hurricane fighters based at Batavia, and we're working on training those crews, getting them up to be a little bit better than they currently are at air combat and defensive combat. But in addition to that, we have turned over some of our medium bombers to better models here. So rather than flying the old crappy Dutch bombers, we now have 18. I think these are A-20 Bostons that are good attack aircraft. And the pilots, according to this, have a 35% bomb accuracy rate and a 45% bomb accuracy rate. I'm not sure that's true because their low-level naval bombing is only 26, so maybe that's, maybe it's ground bombing, which is closer to 40. But in any event, we are trying to get them ready for service. 2 of them are currently active in one squadron, 1 in another. If he gives us 2 or 3 days before he lands, we should have the bulk of these squadrons up and running, probably have 10 to 12 ready American A-20 tactical bombers for low-level bombing. And then we'll also potentially have another 5 or so B-25s, which we're trying to get up and ready for service. All but 2 of those should be ready in 3 days. We've already got 2 ready now. If he lands tomorrow, it's going to be problematic. Currently, they're all set to train. We would switch them over to hit his shipping as it unloads after the initial landing. But if he gives us more time, then maybe we could even intercept them on their way across the sea. Are we going to evac some troops from Bataan, Devonta? Not yet. Not now, anyway. There's no reason to withdraw them now. It would just make Bataan weaker to no purpose. But if we decide to, we can use Catalinas out of Rangoon to pull at least some troops back. You know, it'd be nice to get like 40 or 50 American infantry squads into Burma. I think that would be helpful against the Japanese there. But we'll have to see where his next strike is. We'll have to see if he sends troops from Singapore to Manila, or to Bataan, if he sends troops from Singapore to Java to try and crush Java quickly. I think he needs to send some of the troops to Java. He'll probably need, 3 divisions, maybe 4, to take Java comfortably. That would leave him another 2 or 3 divisions still at Singapore to figure out what they want to do. Maybe move him to Bataan to reduce that more quickly, or just let him dry on the vine and send 2 to 3 divisions to Thailand and to Burma. That's another option. He's probably going to want to try and reduce Port Blair sooner rather than later. He does have some paratroopers that are currently cut off there. I don't have the strength to eject him from the island. That may be the job of the SSV brigade once we get it all back to Sabang, but it's a little bit shot up for that. So we might just air transport troops in from Rangoon. Additionally, we do have troops on Colombo. This is probably a bit of a tempting target for him if he were to go after Sri Lanka, because we've got 2 subs and 2 cruisers in the dry docks. We've got, I think we've got a pretty large amount of shipping all at the base here. I was going to send a battleship down to Port Blair, but I'm not sure that's a good idea anymore with the fall of Singapore. I was going to try and bombard his troops there and assist our reduction of his troops potentially by sending the battleship Revenge down there, but that may be a foolish idea, so we'll have to reconsider that. Could we pull the Dutch troops out of Ambon? I don't have enough aircraft. I mean, I could try and send all those PBYs down to Australia to evacuate the Sparrow Battalion, I guess. I don't know. We'll think about it. Probably won't do that. They're holding off an entire Japanese brigade that he's not able to use elsewhere, so I guess I'd rather them try and keep holding as long as they can. And then, as we already said, Baker Island is currently it will be ours. So we landed on Baker Island. We didn't take the island yet, but the troops have been ordered to attack. I don't know where 12 of the infantry squads went. It feels like there's like 120 fewer combat infantrymen on this island than there should be. But in any event, we landed on Baker. There's no enemy troops here, so the base should fall to us this turn. I suppose he might be able to like fly in airborne troops or something like that to try and hold the base. I guess that's theoretically possible. But we'll see. Yeah, I mean, if Blair falls, it makes shipping into Rangoon very, very difficult if he gets any aircraft on Blair. There's no doubt about that. But long term, there's not a lot we can do to prevent it. It will eventually fall, and Rangoon will eventually be cut off. We won't be able to send large numbers of cargo ships into Rangoon for very much longer. So we're trying to get in what we can now. We have 100,000 supply there. 45,000 is in shipping in the port. We have another 30,000 on the way down. Once we get that unloaded, we'd have another 70,000 coming ashore at Rangoon. With 100,000 already here, this should be more than enough supply to fight the Burma campaign for a considerable amount of time. It may slow down our trickle of supply heading into China, but that was going to happen eventually no matter what. So other than that, there's some logistical stuff going on, but there's not a lot else that I need to do right now. I mean, if we take a look at the intelligence report and we go to last turn, we lost 4 operational aircraft. He lost 1 ship sunk last turn. We lost 4 mine layers in Singapore, I guess, destroyed while building. So they were, I think they were going to be completed in like a day or two. Meanwhile, we lost the Manoa, a U.S. naval cargo ship here near Victoria off the Canadian coast. And supposedly, we sank the I-19 near Agrihan. I don't remember 11286. Where is that even? Where the hell? How would we have... Well, we know this is bullshit because we don't have any destroyers out here. Unless it sank on its way back to Japan after suffering damage in a previous depth charging, which I guess is possible. Ground units destroyed, a whole bunch. 9th Indian Division, 11th Indian Division, both lost at Singapore. Curious how much it would cost. Does it give us a cost to recall? Can we even recall it? I guess it wouldn't cost very much to recall because we don't have enough Indian squads in the pool to fill it out, so you'd only have like 4 assault value in either of these units. Probably some of the better units to look into recalling are the RAF base forces, or the, maybe the Australian Brigade. They'd be 25. But yeah, some of the base forces, maybe some of the anti-aircraft units. I'd have to take a look at the pools for those units to see what we would actually have available to us if we rebuild those units. So we'll look into some of that, but I don't know about the 3rd Indian HQ. I don't know if that's valuable that we should be doing. We definitely would have the support in the pool to be able to reinforce them. So in terms of motorized support and support, those are easy things to come by. So we could replenish the 3rd Indian Infantry Corps. The Malayan Army we can't recall. It's an ABDA force. You can't recall it once it's destroyed. So I don't know. We'll look into some of that. So yeah, I mean, we made them pay for Singapore. It took them a long time. We're near the end of March. I think we'll see what happens at Moresby in the coming turns. Last time he tried to attack there, he didn't succeed. The troops there on our end are low on supply. We're trying to fly some in, but it's doubtful we can supply, all of these troops here. So we'll probably lose a bunch more squads when Port Moresby falls. Also, that'll be 320 more assault value for him, so that'll be worth a lot for him. But yeah, right now it seems like he's largely focused on strengthening his hold on Moresby and south into the Coral Sea with some of these landings he's doing. Who knows what these ships up here might be doing? We could see a strike at Fiji this turn, but that's probably enough of me rambling, guys. You know, we'll have to take a look at what I'm going to do off screen. So, but I'll probably send this back to XTRG tomorrow, and we'll go from there. Meanwhile, Vespasian Flavius, thank you very much for the follow. The Hoff 87, I feel like I've heard your name before. Thank you for the follow as well. Inked Pitbull, thank you for the follow. The Big Bang and Korobar, thank you for the subs. And I think that's going to do it for tonight. The French troops at Tahiti? What do you want to see the French troops at Tahiti for? You think he's going to land there or something? J Street, thanks for the bits. Long time no see, dude. Where you been? And Oxlorn, thank you very much for the follow. Okay. So there's just a detachment at Tahiti. I have troops that are on the way that'll probably be there within the week, but we have troops on the way to Tahiti. Proto's Rocker, thank you very much for the sub, appreciated. The Free French, you know, that's not true. We have Free French. These troop transports up here. These guys are Free French. The Felix Rizal, and then we also have the guys that carried the 223 to safety at Rangoon are also Free French. The Captain Saint-Jacques. Free French transports are doing their duty. The Free French mine layer. What was the name of that ship? Can you remind me? The Charval. We'll take a look and see if we can find her. It was a mine layer, and she held off the Japanese landings on New Caledonia single-handedly, doing quite a bit of damage. She'd be an auxiliary, right? No, she wouldn't be an auxiliary. Where is AM? I don't... Oh, mine. Okay. Type. Here she is. She's at Melbourne. So this Free French command, these guys were heroes like none other, fully repaired, ready for service, currently sitting in port, drinking whatever it is they're drinking, probably maybe some French wine or whatnot, sitting back, relaxing, chilling, playing some b-ball out by, you know, but just hanging out there in Melbourne. You've been getting notifications about my Twitch streams 12 hours after my streams. How the hell does that happen, J Street? I mean, I wish I could control it, but that's messed up. All right, so that's the situation, guys. I think we're going to wrap it up for tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, the stream. Hope you guys... I'm curious to see... Actually, this should really open things up. The fall of Singapore should really open things up. We should be able to see where his next major moves are. It's going to free up 4 or 5 divisions. I'm expecting some pushes either on Burma or Sri Lanka. I also am kind of expecting a push down here near Fiji, which if these guys really are like heavy ships down here, that would certainly make sense. And I'm a little worried that they may be moving toward Fiji tomorrow, just given that if we're detecting them, they're already 12 hexes away. So he might bring these guys down here. If they're carriers, he might strike at Suva tomorrow. So I think I'll probably bring these P-40s over here so that we've got 80 modern fighters ready to meet him. And then if he waits another day, then we'll have 100 just to see what's going on there. But in any event, I've already said it a few times. Thanks again for tuning in, guys. Thanks to the subs, to the bits, all of you. Until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying once again, thank you very much for watching. And until next time, I'm out.